All right, so you're thinking about getting a module for the back of your radio, but you want to know which the best one should I get? Is Crossfire the best one? I don't know. Is it Tracer, 2.4 gigahertz, or Crossfire was 900 megahertz? Is this better? What about Ghost for racing? Is that better? Oh, ExpressLRS, that's open source. So it's 2.4 gigahertz open source for ExpressLRS, or the 900 megahertz open source for ExpressLRS. So what do we think is best? Well, I've been doing some end-to-end latency testing on this, along with jitter and packet rate kind of stuff. And let's take a look. So let's see how they all perform. Let's see what the differences are, the distributions on when the packets are received, things like that. And by looking at the data, you're going to find out some interesting things about the different module types we have here so far. So as I covered in a previous video on the end-to-end latency setup, there's an open source project that has an end-to-end latency test firmware that you can load on this ESP8266. And I'll make a link to that video in the upper right. You can check that out. You can buy this for like $6. You could do these tests yourself. It's not difficult. But with all that said, I did all the tests for you, collected a whole bunch of data. So let's get into some of my observations on the different units, because it really, they all perform fairly well. And they all just have their differences. Some are better in some areas, some are better in others, but let's look at the details. So what I did here, and big thanks to Alessandra, the lead dev from ExpressLRS, a lot of the end-to-end stuff they're doing just to make sure they're getting it right. So you can use that same testing, and they're making sure they're being competitive with ExpressLRS, or in some areas beating the competition with the firmware. So that's what they have this open source project for, and doing some of the testing, but they're very engaged in doing the testing on ExpressLRS and a couple of variants. I opened that up a little bit more widely, did some Crossfire testing, did some 900 megahertz testing, things like that. So I developed this Excel spreadsheet, and what I want to do is make this available as one PDF. I'm going to put it on my website, theuavtech.com, and I'll show that link at the end of the video, and I'll have it linked down in the description below. So you can check that out. I'm just going to keep this updated. I want to get all the information in one spot so you can kind of see everything. So breaking down on the upper left side of the sheet here, we have the average end-to-end latency. And the average end-to-end latency is going to be, it's sending 500 packets at a half a second interval. And some of those packets take a little longer and some take a little shorter before it's actually triggered on the receiver side. So it's just the average of all that together. So it's a very high level snapshot, but you can see down below, they actually come in a distribution, which is, you got to peel back that onion to that kind of next degree. So let me show you the distribution. So down here, this is again the end-to-end latency distribution plots. So if I take this number here, for example, and I look at ExpressLRS, this is average 5 millisecond end-to-end latency for what it's receiving. But you can see down here, 244 of the 500 packets were received between 4 and 5 milliseconds, and then 245, so half and half, are received between 5 and 6 milliseconds. So you can see there's a variability there. Half the packets had one interval, half the packets had another interval. And of course, that same thing can be seen across the different modes here. So this is at 500 hertz mode, this is at 250 hertz mode, and 150 hertz, and then 50 hertz mode, respectively. And you can see just kind of the difference in packets. So in 250 hertz mode, which if you take 1 divided by 250, that's 4 milliseconds, right? So take 1 divided by whatever the hertz is. So 1 divided by 500 is 2 milliseconds, times 1,000 is 2 milliseconds. 1 divided by 250, 4 milliseconds, so on and so forth. So you can convert hertz to milliseconds to get an idea of what that means in relation to timing. So the intent of the 500 hertz mode is that it's a faster rate, a faster end-to-end, and a smaller packets, the individual packets that it's sending. So the rate of which the packets, the end-to-end latency is lower, and then the packets are smaller as well. You can see here most of the packets, like for example in the 150 hertz, between 8 to 16, I would say 8 to 14 milliseconds. It's just a distribution. Some, you can see the numbers up there, 144, 152, so on and so forth. It's a histogram distribution that we're seeing. Now the next piece of this puzzle is the packet rate jitter. So for the end-to-end latency, we're triggering the signal here in the transmitter. I actually have this cord, and I reviewed it in that other video in detail. So it knows when it's being triggered, and this is measured. This is tied in to this ESP board. So the signal goes through the air to the receiver, but the board can record when the actual signal is sent because we have that hard while together. So that's your end-to-end latency. The other piece of this is the packet rate. So it's sending a packet of information. Well, how big is that packet? How long is it? Is it a 20 millisecond packet or frame? Is it a 10 millisecond, 6.67 millisecond, or 2 millisecond? How long is that packet frame? And does it vary? Does sometimes it's a 2 millisecond, but then sometimes that packet's longer, and that can cause jitter, can cause jumpiness in your feed forward. It just, if your input signal to start controlling your quad is all jittery and jumpy, well, that's going to get magnified, and just that starts the process off as a jittery, jumpy kind of signal. So we want to have that jitter or packet rate very consistent as possible. So looking in the upper right here, we have this kind of all color coded as well. Hopefully you can notice that. So like, for example, that ExpressLRS 500 Hertz mode, you can see it's color green here and also green here. I do have a darker green here for the 900 Hertz one. That's a different one. But you can see what we're getting here for the packet jitter. You can see there's one jump. You'll see that mostly with all ExpressLRS. If there's any telemetry packets or any sync packets, you're going to get these big jumps. And for Express, I have the sync and the telemetry turned off on more of the race modes like the 500 and 250. But then the more long range modes like the 150 or 50, I have telemetry turned on and I have sync turned on. So you're going to get some more of these spikes because you're going to need those two things. It only makes sense to me that if you're going more long range, you're going to want to have telemetry so you can see your RSSI. And then you're going to want to have sync too. So if you're have a fail-safe, you don't have to disarm for it to lock back on again. That's kind of the sync thing with ExpressLRS. So if you have sync on, you get more jumps in the packets. However, if you have a fail-safe, it will connect with it being ARM-Jet, which all the other receivers do that as well. So you can see long range, you would need that, but like short racing environment, I think that it's reasonable to have sync turned off and then have telemetry turned off as well. So again, we have Express here, and then you can zoom in a little bit, and I have a lot overlaying, a lot around the 4 millisecond range, but we have Express 250, we have Tracer, 8 channel, 12 channel, we have Ghost, Pure Race, and Ghost 250 as well. So there's some interesting stuff you can peel back when you start looking at everything together. So let's just look at this grouping, and can we give you my kind of dissection of that. So looking at here, you can see that ExpressLRS at 500 Hertz, the 2.4 with telemetry off and sync off is about the same as, Ghost Race 250. Pure Race is a little bit longer on average latency for the end-to-end. And then you can see Tracer's right in that mix, so 5 millisecond average, 5 millisecond average. Pure Race is around 7, it's not too bad. And then Tracer, it's interesting, either 8 or 12 channels. Same thing with Crossfire. You can see 8 or 12 channels. So I don't really know the advantage. I don't see any advantage to going to 8 channel in Crossfire. I know TBS says to use 8 channel, but the end-to-end latency is not different anywhere, and the packet rate jitter is not less anywhere. So I have no idea why you'd not use just 12. I don't see any reason. It doesn't seem to show up in any of the data being better in any way, shape, or form. So nevertheless, but when we look down here, you can start to see some things like, for example, let's just look at this, for the racing scene. So you can see that, on average, the ExpressLRS at 500 Hertz and the Ghost 250, Express is doing a little bit better for its distribution. The packets are coming in, or the end-to-end latency, I'm sorry, is, 4 to 5, 5 to 6 milliseconds, half and half, where Ghost 250 is going to be a little bit smaller range. Some of the packets might be above 7 milliseconds by the time they get there. Some might be as low as 3 milliseconds. So you're just going to have a wider range of whenever that packet's actually going to get to the quad to make that commanded move. I have, what I did here is I broke up the end-to-end latency distributions in kind of just different groupings. This is totally arbitrary, but I kind of did the 3 to 7, 4 to 13, and then 8 to 30 and 20 to 100. I did have Tracer over here under this 4 to 13 just because, its end-to-end was a little higher. It's 4 to around 8 milliseconds. So it's kind of on that edge. If you really look, it's not all that much different. I mean, it's a little bit, the end-to-end latency is a little bit better than Crossfire. So Crossfire was 8 to 13. This is 4 to 8. So yeah, it's about half. You know, they're twice as fast from packet rate, getting just from your conventional 900 megahertz Crossfire to go to Tracer. You know, your packets are going to get there a little bit quicker. So again, going to Ghost here, you'd say, well, you know, Ghost and ExpressLRS are pretty competitive there. They're, you know, just a little bit bigger distribution, but you got to also make sure you look up here at the jitter. So Ghost, the 250, has a lot of jitter in the packet rate. First of all, Express is down at 2 millisecond packets. So this is 2000 microseconds, which is 2 milliseconds. Just think about the comma as a decimal point. So this is 2 millisecond packets. So there's no other module that is doing 2 milliseconds packets as of right now. Of course, there might be firmware updates where they change that. So the individual packets it's sending, that ExpressLRS is sending, are very small, 2 milliseconds. So every 2 milliseconds they're being updated. Whereas most of the pack is between 4 and 4.1 milliseconds that the packets of information are actually being updated. And obviously, the faster you update the packets, the more smooth. It's like a higher resolution. Think of it that way. So it's Express has, with that 2 millisecond packet rate, has kind of a higher resolution on the sticks, because as you're moving the sticks, it's making those stair steps updates much quicker, well, twice as fast as the rest of the pack, which are around 4 milliseconds. Again, Ghost Race 250 was looking pretty good from end to end, right? It's low in the pack there, but the jitter is pretty bad. I don't know why, and I would assume that will get better in a firmware update, but now that this video is coming out. But as from now, that's it. And as with there is firmware updates, I will go ahead and do some retesting on this. If you kind of zoom in on this, and again, I'll have the PDF there so you can zoom in on it with some good resolution. You can see, again, you know, Express is doing pretty good for its jitter. TBS is doing good as well, and same thing for, you know, 8 or 12 channels. The Ghost Pure Race is doing pretty good. There was a couple higher spikes here. Now, Ghost Pure Race doesn't have telemetry at all, just like Express doesn't here either. Tracer, though, I believe that has telemetry. So, you know, with Tracer at 8 or 12 channels, they have telemetry on, and, you know, the jitters are just the same as everything else. So it's to say, well, these other ones are better. It's like, well, I don't know. Express doesn't have telemetry down here. Neither does Pure Race. They don't have telemetry. Tracer does have telemetry on 8 or 12 channels, and the jitter and is just about as good. So of course you gotta weigh that in a little bit here with like the Pure Race. Again, this has telemetry off. This is getting 5 to around, I don't know, let's just say 9 millisecond packets. Tracer is getting 4 to 8, so 5 to 9, 4 to 8. It's about the same. This one has telemetry. This one does not have telemetry. On the Ghost front, you could say, well, this is even faster. This is 3 to 7, but the jitter on this, as of right now, for the Race 250 is pretty bad. Express is the tightest up here at the 500 hertz mode, and does have the highest packet rate as well at the 2 milliseconds. So that's kind of my synopsis and breakdown here of this. So that's the race scene, right? Maybe you need telemetry, maybe you don't. You know, you can make some compromises here to get the fastest end-to-end, the fastest update and packet rates you can. But what about the other side of the spectrum? What about long range? I want to go long range. I'm interested in that. I don't necessarily need the fastest, greatest packet rate. What's the best for me there? So again, coming down to this side, what I was really surprised on was Ghost long range. The end-to-end for their long range is quite a bit of range. You're going from 35 to over 100 milliseconds on 16 of the packets at least. And the packet rate, we're looking at around 66.7 milliseconds. That's double DJI's latency for the packet rate. And then the end-to-end is also could be, some of the packets are up to 100 milliseconds. So their long range mode is definitely pretty slow. So hopefully it's getting some mega long range. I think there's been some testing, and Express is, you know, doing quite a bit better there. where they're 21 to 41 milliseconds for their end-to-end, and you can see the distribution here. It's not spread out as much. And again, the packet rate for this is the purple. They're down around 20 milliseconds, 19 and a half, 20 millisecond packets instead of this 66. So the 66 was really blown up. Has a lot of jitter in it too. Express has these spikes for the telemetry and the sync. It's not, to me, with ExpressLRS, all their jitter is by design, right? It's not like, oh, it's just random fluctuations. You can see it's the telemetry packets and it's the sync packets coming in, where it just doubles the packet. So if this is a 19 and a half, it's going to go up to around 40 milliseconds, and then back down for that one packet will just be twice as long. So on the long range, that's the 2.4 gigahertz side. But we all know 900 megahertz goes a little farther, just naturally. Lower frequencies can penetrate walls better, can go distance farther. So how's it looking? How's Crossfire adding into this mix? What if I take a R9 receiver and flash ExpressLRS on it? How's that doing? So coming down to Crossfire 12 channel mode, since we don't really see, again, any difference between 8 and 12 channels on Crossfire. You can see 8 channel mode, 12 channel mode. This is at the 150 hertz update rate. We're getting, in this update mode, we're getting between 7 and 13 milliseconds. You can see it's the same 8 and 12 channels. If we go to the 50 hertz mode, which is the long range mode, I just set that at 12, thinking, well, if you're going long range, might as well have all the channels that you can. You can see here the end-to-end is 16 to around 36. So that's pretty good. That's that's about the same thing as the ExpressLRS, a little bit better actually. Some of them are down 16 to 36. Let's check out, and this is of course full telemetry. You can see 900 hertz mode up here. So that's the kind of darker blue. So let's look at that up here, and you can see the jitter. Yeah, it's not as tight as ExpressLRS, honestly, but we're getting full telemetry here. You can see that, Express again has those big jumps that Crossfire doesn't have. It has kind of just more jitter in between, but it doesn't have those big jumps where it's doubling the frames for a sync pack or a telemetry packet to come back. It's kind of taking care of that all within its distribution of jitter, I guess, or whatever you want to call it. We can also check out ExpressLRS 900 hertz mode on a R9 receiver. Again, at the 200 hertz mode, you can see 7 to 12 with the end-to-end distribution. Just a little bit, not really that much. Probably, really, I wouldn't say it's anything noticeable. 7 to 12 versus 7 to 13. Yeah, it's not that much difference. It's kind of doing about the same-ish too for long range, the 50 hertz mode versus Crossfire. You can see a couple of larger packets as it's doubling going up here, but there's a few amount of those, at least in a 500 hertz sample. And again, down here, it's 21 to 41 for the distribution of the end-to-end coming through. Coming up here to the top, again, about the same frame rate, and you can see, again, just how Express runs kind of more of a deliberate jitter or jumps in its packets. I'm assuming there for anything long range, you'd want to have on some sort of telemetry. So I have the telemetry set as high as it can be. The telemetry ratio is 1 to 128. So it's sending a data packet in ExpressLRS every 128th step or packet that's going out. It's going 128 of them are going from the transmitter out, and then one comes back from the receiver, and 128 go out again, one comes back. So that's what that telemetry ratio means for ExpressLRS. We can also see stuff for the 900 megahertz Express that the jitter, honestly, on the packets for the 900 hertz is pretty good. We are at 200 hertz packet mode, which is around 4 milliseconds. And we have telemetry off and sync off. So if you're doing some kind of more close range stuff or just medium range where you're not really worried about it fail-safing because it's such a robust signal, you can see the jitter is really low with the telemetry off. If you turn the telemetry on, you're going to obviously have a couple jumps, for those packets that, every 128th packet, you're going to have a spike that's double. So this would go from 4 to 8 just for that one jump there. And it's going to be very deliberate. That's just how Express works. But the jitter comparison on the 900 hertz mode versus even the 2.4s, it's looking pretty good. So what do you think? Does this answer the question for you of what is the best module? Again, at the beginning of this video, I think it really depends on exactly what you're looking for. I think Crossfire for long range is still really compelling. It depends on where you want to put your focus on end-to-end latency, packet rate. Are you really into racing? Are you really into freestyle where you want a little bit of both? Or are you into long range where that is ultimately everything you care about? I have links to all these products down below. So if you are interested in picking any of those up, check them out through the links. It does support the channel. This testing also doesn't cover specifically the feature sets. With Ghost and Tracer, you have the My VTX kind of modes where you can set your VTX in the modules and it will push to your transmitters. Joshua Bardwell has 2 great videos on those. I will make links to that down below as well. So there's additional feature sets in some of the modules versus other modules. For example, ExpressLRS does not have that. As of the recording of this video, ExpressLRS doesn't have full telemetry, although that is coming shortly. So within a couple weeks or a month, they will have full telemetry support. And just usability is another consideration. So with Ghost, TBS Tracer, or Crossfire, when you update these modules with the firmware using the specific software from the vendor to do that, it will update your receiver as soon as it connects to that receiver. As of right now, ExpressLRS doesn't do that. ExpressLRS has wireless mode, so you can have your receivers go into a wireless mode and you can connect your laptop to the receiver directly in Wi-Fi mode and do an update through a page it loads. So it's pretty straightforward, but it's not as easy as these, I have to admit. When they turn on, it says, if you have a new receiver update, do you want to update your receiver? And you just hit yes. It's very easy. So these usability things you have to consider with these as well. So again, links down below to these products. Drop any questions in the comments. Thanks everybody for your time, and I hope this helped.
And smash that like button, please. Cause then if you guys get me 1 billion likes, then I can make videos that are Fortnite. So do you want Fortnite videos or this video? What's better?